You think about where you're going to go to a nice dinner, you think about the food, but you also think about the atmosphere you want. And that atmosphere is created from the interior architecture and the interior design. Same thing with retail. When you have a product you want to buy, when you walk into the store, if that image, that first impression of that store doesn't match up with the product that you're going to buy, there's a disconnect. And in marketing, that's called confusion. And if you confuse, you lose.
All right, welcome to the Medical Entrepreneur Podcast. We have a very special guest with us today, a guest that's going to guide us on creating our visions and making the best impact for our patients, Carolyn Boltz. Carolyn, could you tell us a little bit about your history and how you help medical entrepreneurs build their practices and design them for their patients?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for having me, Dr. Adam. I appreciate it. So my name is, as you said, Carolyn Volk, and I run a company named Crossfield. And we focus on holistic healthcare design, and we do it virtually all over the country for full architecture, interiors, engineers, the whole thing. And where our passion came from is we are patients of holistic health. I love the opportunity for your body to heal itself when it's given the right tools. And so with all of that, we wanted to help elevate the profession and help it be more of a go-to for the patient and not be, we're competing against the medical world. And so how do we become more accepted? Because it's still a little bit vague to most patients, most potential patients. It's becoming better. So part of the way we do that is we focus on the only thing we give back, as I'm an architectural interior designer, and the only thing I could really give back is help rework on the brick and mortar, so that brick and mortar helps attract and retain patients. So that's the passion that we're on. We've been doing it about, and when I say we, it's my husband and myself that started this company together, and his background is architectural engineering and contracting. And we're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, but all of our work is virtual. So we're all over the nation and all over the world. But we started as a design build firm in the Atlanta area in 2003. And Life University, the largest chiropractic college, became our client. And through that, we really got the ins and outs of the struggles that alternative healthcare deals with. And it organically merged into, I started teaching a class. We had an opportunity to do a couple of standalone clients and just felt passionate about the more smaller business as opposed to the corporation, and saw a way we could make a difference. So that's what we did. We started this in 2011, and we've been doing it since.
Well, I really love that. I love the fact that you have a husband-wife team, which is really awesome, because I see a lot of businesses that the husband-wife team, they do very well because they have everything together. And it's just like imagine if you had two business partners that work together 24/7, their business is obviously going to run better than somebody who only sees each other a few hours, right?
That is true. And we can go into a whole nother story about you've got to have the right sandboxes and you got to create boundaries. So once you get past that, it's a great deal.
And then I love the fact that you were able to take your passion and really help an entire industry. For a lot of us in medicine, we grew up in these kind of, I don't know that they were ever properly designed as like an interior environment for patients. But if you look at the traditional hospital, they have the kind of sterile feeling, usually they choose some kind of color that seems to be like a light green or something that doesn't really match.
I know where that came from. It is changing. It is changed. And it has been changing. Like I said, we've been doing this since 2011, and we've seen it evolve so that it's becoming more patient-centric and more understanding, because there's a psychology of your environment. There's a psychology of space. And it's interesting because in retail design and hospitality design, they embrace that 100%. They understand that environment that they create is part of the product that they offer. When you think about you're going to go out to dinner with someone and hospitality design would be dinners and hotels and restaurants and hotels. You think about where you're going to go to a nice dinner, you think about the food, but you also think about the atmosphere you want. And that atmosphere is created from the interior architecture and the interior design. Same thing with retail. When you have a product you want to buy, when you walk into the store, if that image, that first impression of that store doesn't match up with the product that you're going to buy, there's a disconnect. And in marketing, that's called confusion. And if you confuse, you lose. So you're fighting against the model. So bringing that philosophy into the healthcare, because healthcare is more competitive than it used to be, or than it probably always has been competitive, or people are paying attention to the fact that it's competitive now. But it's competitive. I mean, you have to show up of why should they come to see you versus the guy around the block or down the street. And yes, it's your practice and what you offer and how you differentiate yourself, but it's also your connectivity to your statement and your brand.
And then could you maybe talk about some of the principles that you might use in your practice of doing the interior design for a healthcare space? Is there any kind of lessons that you've seen over and over, like designing spaces that are a certain way or openness, et cetera?
The very first thing you've got to focus on is you're designing for your ideal patient. So with that, if you go to our website, you'll see a plethora of different styles. Some are closed, some are open, some are bright, some are dark, it all depends on that patient that you're trying to attract and retain and what their circumstances are, their ailments, their needs. I'm just going to go to one extreme. Someone who's working with a lot of sport athletes and stuff might have a whole different atmosphere than someone that's working in geriatric. So that would be an extreme, or pediatric, and then you get the family health that you've got to cover everything. And how do you create an environment? Because you want to create an environment that just makes them feel that they can trust you. And you want
Absolutely.
that environment to support that and not deteriorate from that.
It's really interesting because in medicine, we learned a lot from the past. And I remember when I was first in medical school, they used to have these statues of famous physicians that you'd walk by. And there's like a little hall, and we'd walk by these statues, right? And one of the statues was a statue of an ancient Egyptian guy named Imhotep, which was thought to be like the first physician. And I remember reading about ancient Egyptian like health and treatment and stuff like that. And one of the things they seem to always be focused upon and is they had very much like geometric designs for their spaces, maybe even questionably acoustic designs. Is there anything that you like see in terms of how you design the environment that may actually help patients heal or help them feel in a certain empowered state to heal?
It, several things that I'm just going to bring up. One is natural light. We know that being able to bring in, if you can get it, natural light and being able to, there's just a healing nature. We all know that. Just think about it. Spring is coming and you walk outside when the spring starts to touch and you have a different energy. You feel different. And so, how can you emulate that? Yes, it's not always going to be beautiful and look like spring on the outside, but how can you help pull that in? Using, we call it biophiliac design, which is using plants and using nature in the environment. And that's both inspirationally healing because it feels like you're connected to nature, but it also, as we know, the plants emit carbon dioxide. It helps for breathing and oxygen. So it increases the oxygen in the space. And it actually physically creates. And so we have that increase in oxygen, just like a fresh air outside and things of that sort. So those are things that if you can bring that into your space, if that has an opportunity to bring it into your space, that we've seen that help. As far as the rest of design and what that does, once again, it goes back to who you're trying to heal. But there's some general, if people are really sick, lower light levels and cool colors like the blues and some of the fresher greens and things of that sort can actually help calm a person down and create a lot of healing. If you're in a physical therapy type space and you want to increase energy, you don't want to use the same thing. You want to bring up your light level. You want to actually have a little burst of color. You don't want to be overstimulating, but you want to have enough to give some energy into the space. So just you have to know what your patients are doing, what you need for your patient. And you might have a space. I think of some doctors we work with that have a variety where they'll have a physical therapy area that might have a lot of brightness to it. And then they'll have an area that's much more softer modalities and things that have to be like IV room. How do you create an IV
Yeah.
room that is Who wants to get stuck? It's a thing now. And so what do? Can you create an IV room that creates a peaceful and serene environment? And people are in there for a while. So what are they looking at and what are they being exposed to? Can you get that on the outside window? Some of the most beautiful IV rooms I've ever seen are looking out at the ocean. That's a unique thing. Can we do that? But you understand what I'm saying? Just the
Oh, 100%. And there's actually medicine, unfortunately, we have been kind of side roaded as a kind of specialty in the sense that we was a big focus for a long time on pharmaceuticals. And that was done by design. But one of the things before they really got into a lot of pharmaceutical stuff was that they used to, you might even have heard stories of back in the day, in the 1920s, they would literally prescribe people to go next to the ocean and like literally say, hey, every morning I want you to spend an hour near the sea and get absorb the sun and feel good. And this was actually thought to be like some form of treatment. Now no one would ever write a prescription for that, but the
now,
reality is I think it still
now
works.
you get into grounding, you get into the salt of the sea. And then I don't know if your engineer people get into energy healing, but that's the idea of energy healing and bringing in that energy from the earth. And so what you're saying in a practice that you can bring in nature, there's positive energy for the most part in nature.
I think you're 100% right. And I do know that it seems even for, I want to say there was even a study for depression where they actually had people spend, I think it was like an hour a day in nature and it decreased their depression level.
I haven't heard that one, but I know we know life therapy that you deal with people in areas of the country. You're in Texas, I'm in Atlanta, so we don't deal with this, but where you have a lot of dark days and a lot of dreary days, and they start to get depressed, and how having a type of light therapy can actually help that. I
Yeah.
don't remember the name of that disease.
Seasonal affective
That's
disorder.
it. Valid.
And then the blue lights are actually been shown to increase that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the energy thing because I think a lot of times in medicine, we're so focused on science that we assume everything has to have a study and these kind of things, which is for some cases very wise. But I do think that the more we look at the surroundings and how we treat our patients, the more we start to realize that there is a lot of energy around it. And there's like this concept of, okay, I'm going to use energy to heal people. But the reality is that everything around you is energy, technically. And so one of the things I thought was really interesting is that people talk about frequencies and these kind of things. One of the most powerful inducers of frequency is actually color. If you look at red, it's a very low frequency versus if you have a whole scale, like of different visible light spectrums, we know that, for example, purple is one of the higher frequencies. Could you maybe talk about how you use color or color theory in your designs?
Wow. So there's actually ancient color therapy. Okay. Also, so we're talking about going full circle here when we're getting into energy and color and things of that sort. But yes, there are. Now, you said red is low frequency in color, and the pigment of color, it can create energy. It can stimulate. So it can actually raise blood pressure and it can do some other things. The pigment of color when people look at the color. And then you go to the opposite of red on the spectrum would be green. Green is one of the calmer colors. So they're cool. So we take the color wheel and split it in half, and we have what we call cool colors and warm colors. And those basically, the warm colors create more energy and the cool colors create more softness or less energy in the pigment of design. When I say pigment color, it's different than light. I don't know why. I don't understand it, but it's because if you break light down, it breaks into different the basics of light are, I'm going to say this, what is it, red and green and yellow or blue. I don't remember. But in pigments, it's red and blue and yellow. You can't mix anything in when I say pigments, I'm talking about your physical world that you touch.
Yeah.
So yeah, we play with color. And with all of those things, when someone looks at their brand, we all think about brand and we think about logo, but brand is so much more encompassing than logo. It's how you show up to the world. But let's just talk about your logo for a minute. And if you identify your logo, people are making judgment immediately when they see something, and they say something like 63 to 90% is based on color alone, which is amazing. It's that first impression. We all know about the red power tie. That's just the thing. It just happens. It just creates power. And at the same time, if you want to be soothing and very, I can go on for a little bit. There's color and then there's patterns and then there's textures and there's all kinds of, we call them the elements of design, which are basically the tools that we use as a designer to create different emotions. Color is one of them. I can go on for a little bit here. I actually, when we started this whole program, we actually started by teaching chiropractors the importance their office has on their success at Life University. We totally created this course for just out of joy, the joy of doing it, right? And I have a whole section in there just about color and color theory. So yeah, it's a thing.
Wow, that's wonderful. And then what's also really cool is the fact that you are the interior designer and your husband is an engineer. So you could basically build any space together, right?
And we did that before we started this business. That's exactly what we did. We worked as a team. And so mine's architectural interiors, and his is architectural engineering, and he's also a general contractor. So we were doing
Wow.
design build together as a team. And yeah, and then we didn't quickly, but we read the E-Myth. That's a whole nother story we talk about. We
Yeah.
read the E-Myth and figured out that we didn't really own a business. We just owned a job and began to work on reinventing ourselves about 2010 -ish, and we're around there. So now I don't design anymore. I do this. I show up and I talk about it. And I have a team of designers that do it for us. So
Oh, so for example, if I had a clinic that I was opening up and I said, "Hey, I have clinic. I bought some land. We're going to build a building. It's going to take 2 years or whatever, 1 year, hopefully." Would we approach you and say, "Hey, can you help design the building and the
yeah,
interior?"
we can, and we have full architectural capability. So we can work with the civil engineer and we can pull in with full architecture. So we design building too. It's not our everyday thing that we do because the majority of our clientele are not building buildings. The majority of our clientele may be buying a building and outfitting the interior, refitting out the interior, or leasing a space. But yeah, we can do the entire thing. So yes, and where we love to start is in that initial planning because we know that if we can get the foundation of planning set, everything else becomes smoother and easier, more cost effective all the way through.
I think it's really true. And I do believe also that with more and more medical professionals leaving what I call mainstream medicine, the insurance based medicine, they now are more subject to the market. And if you look at the way that people interact with retail, I mean, if you, for example, I'd love to get your opinion on like Apple Store, obviously designed in a very specific way versus say like Macy's or Sears.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me use an example that's one extreme to the other. Okay. Because I use
sure.
this in my classes and we talk about Walmart and then we talk about a high end designer store like a Louis Vuitton. Okay. And so Walmart was very purposely designed to support their brand, which is the low cost leader. So you look at the lighting, bright overall wash of light everywhere, creates a different kind of energy in the space. You look at the flooring is very austere and sometimes it's concrete, sometimes it's your cheap VCT. There's nothing in it that you walk in and feel like this is expensive. Nothing at all, right? You you have shelves and shelves of product as stuffed to the gills as it can possibly get. So you have that sense of I'm rummaging like you would in a garage sale to find your deal, right? The other thing they do is there's signage everywhere, display and signage. So you can walk in there and just get lost in finding your deal. You don't care about how you dress when you go there. You know, it's pretty amazing when you walk through how you see people dress. And it's a whole different mentality. The colors that they use, yellow and blue, they use the base primary colors, which are appeal to the lower economic bracket. And all of those things are designed on purpose. Let's go all the way to Louis Vuitton. Okay. First off, all the colors are neutraled out. They're very obscure, almost no color. You know what I'm saying? They're very monochromatic, etc. And the product, one at a time on a shelf. They're displayed like pieces of art, right? and you pay the money
Yes.
like they're a piece of art. And so it's a whole different, the lighting is very varied from space to space. You feel like when you change the lighting as you walk through the space, it changes your mood, and it focuses, all the lighting is focused on the product. And then the middle of the store is more of an ambient light from the exterior, very much on purpose to sell the $20,000 handbag. You know, I'm saying it's just, and it's designed that way. Now, those are too extreme. So what I tell our doctors, then you don't want to be necessarily be a Walmart, and you don't necessarily want to be a Louis Vuitton. You might, you were talking earlier about regenerative medicine to the up and coming athletes. You probably need to be a Louis Vuitton to pay for that,
Yes.
to pay for that price of that ticket at this point. And then you might want to be a Walmart and see lots and lots of patients, and you might want to. And so that design needs to appeal to that. Maybe you want to work in the inner cities, and maybe you need to make sure if you're going to work in inner cities, your office doesn't look like a Louis Vuitton. So you just need to match your ideal client as best you can. And if you have a range of client, and you know this in marketing, there is an ideal. If you design to the ideal, then the peripheral around the ideal will be satisfied.
That's so true. And so do you, for example, if you have a customer that comes to you and says, hey, I have a place that I rented, I just signed the lease, I have a shell, it's completely empty, not sure how to make this work. Would you go through like exercise with them to identify their ideal client? Like, how do you guys, how would you might treat that person?
So that's a great. We ask the question. So we have a 6-step process, and in our first step, we call it discover, and it is very much, what are your requirements for your space? So we recommend that's done before you ever go look for space, because that helps you get really zoned in on it works with your business model, what kind of practice you're going to have, and how many patients you want to see, and how many exam rooms you need. I mean, it's a quantifiable number that you need to get to, but also who are you going after, and what's your brand and what's your image. There are people that are wonderful at helping pull out people's brand. We're more, you tell me your brand, and we're going to help design the space, because we're going to understand the psychographics and the psychology and all of that brand and of that person. We're not going to help you figure it out, because that's not what we do. But there are people that do that, right? Help you really dig into who is your ideal person, who is your ideal brand. Actually, ChatGPT can do a lot of that for you now.
The power of
The
AI.
power of AI can do a lot of it. But as you design the space for that ideal patient, the designers understand the psychology of all of these things. So they understand it's not just the ideal patient, but how do you want to show up to that ideal patient? That's the brand part. And how do you want that ideal patient to feel in the space? And what kind of takeaway do you want them to have? And we've just seen we see 10 to 20% increase in revenue almost immediately. One of the biggest things we see is people start to, especially practices that have been around for a long time, their old patients start to refer people. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a really great point that we could dive into as well, because for a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this as well in the past, I don't think I realized how important design was or these kind of things, because I'm thinking very functionally, hey, how do we get people through? This kind of thing. And when you work in like the mainstream medicine or the insurance world, your reimbursements are essentially capped either by the government or by the insurance companies. And so you're playing a game where it's high volume. It's basically being the Walmart, right? Yeah. But when it comes to higher end practices, is there anything that you work with them on in order for them to showcase their own skills or help? Because I know, for example, like when you go into an Apple store, you're not thinking I'm going to buy this stuff for $5, right? Like you could tell it's very expensive. Everything in there is very high end. They have these tables that are flat and they're open. And there's not salespeople like you go to, for example, Best Buy, salespeople come to you and they, hey, can I help you find something? Apple store, you got to go chase these people down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to get on a list, and you have to be. And Apple's a fascinating study on how they developed that brand. And Steve Jobs was a big part of that image of, and how they simplified and simplified. That's something we have to
Yeah.
think about, simplify. And that's how that brand shows up for them. And yeah, that's a whole nother story. Let me use another story though. Let me use Starbucks.
Sure.
Okay. So Starbucks created a environment that actually create. I would talk about that hospitality environment as well as the retail part of that. They created an environment that you wanted to hang out in. And they did that with color and lighting. The majority of it was color and lighting. And you can go from Starbucks to Starbucks and they're not all going to be the same. They didn't stereotype brand it too much because they allowed the demographics of the area to actually influence it. So that was just amazing. But if you think about it, they have people come in and hang out for a relatively low dollar amount per table. You follow what I'm saying? As opposed to a really high end restaurant that thinks about turning tables,
So
they have to
true.
turn tables as fast because if people are sitting there spending $500 a meal versus $50 a meal. It's just an interesting phenomenon. But what they did is by creating that environment where people wanted to hang out, they created a culture slash cult, that's what cult and culture are connected to, right? So they
Yeah.
created something that people identified with their brand and wanted to be with that brand. And that's a lot of what Apple did. Apple, there are people that, and I am one of them. I have the iPhone and stuff like that too. And I would have a Mac or back then it was a Mac. My first computer was a Mac and I am old. And so it was 1982, 3, 82, 3, something like that. And I Mac.
Wow, that's like an apple.
Yeah, an original Mac. I think it was 212K was the max. Can you imagine that?
Isn't that amazing?
But the point is that it created a following. I don't know whether our doctors are trying to do that. Our doctors that we're looking at, they're trying to create they have a service they want to provide. They have a passion that they're trying to serve, and they need that environment to match. So they go and they understand they need to spend money on a website now. There's very few that don't get that. They understand that when people first see it, they're going to see that website. Is the message going to speak to the patient? They do it right. It's not all about the doctor. It's about the patient. It's about the patient's needs, things of that sort. But if they go to the office and it doesn't match, that's the disconnect. So it doesn't have to be expensive either. It just has to be very intentional. It has to be very purposeful.
Wow, I think that's definitely a valuable thing right there is that it doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be intentional. I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend of mine's a plastic surgeon and he bought all sorts of fancy stuff for his office. But the thing is, it didn't seem to have a unifying message. Like there's a whole bunch of really fancy high end stuff, but it's almost like eclectic in a way. And I remember going in there and I thought, this feels weird. And like I said, I'm not a big design guy, but I've realized a couple things. One is it does totally create an environment in an emotional feel when you go into a place, 100%. And that's extremely important. And then number two, what I also see is I see a lot of physicians and nurse practitioners who are now doing cash-based clinics, whether that be weight management, aesthetics, regenerative medicine, et cetera. And they get nervous when it's time for them to present a price to a patient because they're used to dealing with insurance and they don't have to worry about the finances, et cetera. And so they're like, "Was someone actually going to pay this much?" And the first thing I say to them is, hey, you should look at your environment. Like, how do people feel when they come in? Because if you come into a rundown office that has scuffs on the wall and maybe you're trying to run a med spa, but your partner's a pediatrician and you got pediatric toys in the waiting room that you're like, oh, those, I don't want to touch those. Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes the feel like a little weird. And maybe you can talk about how like you can, because of your ability to make the intention of space, how you might be able to help someone who's starting their own practice in order to set that intention for their space.
So once again, if you're starting your own practice, start with who's your ideal client. You have to start there. Who's your ideal client? And secondly, how do you want to show up to them? And think of all those emotional words. They're emotional words that you're talking about. And then what we have our clients do is we actually have you go find an inspirational picture. Okay. So, because if you tell me you want an open environment and the guy next door says he wants an open environment, your vision of an open environment will not match the vision of an open environment. So as a design firm, we know that a picture speaks 1,000 words. So we have our clients actually build a vision board of sorts. And it is not that, hey, I want my office to match this. We don't want that at all. Although sometimes we do have them come, I want my office to look just like this, and say, okay, your design fees a lot less because we're just going to match this. But usually it's not. It's usually, I like this, but I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't that, etc. Or they'll say, but what the designer does is they actually look at those pictures and they go through an interview process of digging through and asking questions to go deep on why you like that picture. Okay. The interior designers are part psychologists. We just are, because we're dealing with psychology of space, we're dealing with psychology of people, and we have to really be able to dig deep to get into the meat of what that desire is, what that purpose, what the goal is. And out of that comes the creativity. Once we can understand and see and envision, and so we tell our clients to start to build vision boards. So that's how you get to the interior. That's how you do things and look at things that work. And first, I'll just throw this out here while we're here. For startups, we created, actually during COVID when it got slow, I put my designers on a project that they could create. I've created 8 different brands, 8 different styles. And those styles, it was all designed using our 3D programming. And so it all designed with the same space, but how that space totally looks different with these different styles. It's called the Design for You. It's on our website if you want to see it. And what it is, it's everything you need to get that style in a box. It's shipped to you in a box. All the information is in a box, et cetera. And we literally created that for startups. So since you're asking, I get to throw that out there. But what it is, each one of those has a different brand message. And so as you look at them, it talks about what does a traditional style say about you? And what are you trying to impress? So there's a difference between, I love this design. This would be what I put in my house. And this is how I need to show up for my patron. It's different. It shouldn't be. We tell our designers, we're not designing for you. We're designing for your ideal client. Now, you're going to be in the space a lot, so you need to love it. You need to like it. And more than likely, you are going to love it and like it because it's going to be an expression of you and your brand, just like your clothes are. But you can't just design that way. You know what I'm saying? You can't, let's just say I know, use the example of a doctor on Miami area, and they're going to do really high-end work, et cetera. But on his off time, he's a beach bum. He's not going to show up as a beach bum at his office. I don't
Hopefully
he
no.
really builds that name and that becomes his brand. Maybe. I can never say never. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's that. That's a fun idea of him, but is that going to help your patrons trust you when they walk in and see you looking like a beach bum when you're charging them $10,000 a visit or whatever it is that you're charging them?
No, very good point. I actually I was going to try to show your website real quick, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah. That'd be awesome.
So here's the website here. And then one thing I thought was really interesting is you put here, attract patients. And so I do believe that there's something to the design of how you attract patients. And it looks like some of the things that you've done.
Yeah.
Could you maybe talk about some of these and how you might have applied some of the theories or, for example, obviously this place here is a brain, spine, and with a pane slashed out here is obviously different than maybe this chiropractic, versus this one. Is there anything that you wanted to maybe talk about with the things that you did here? Or?
Yeah, I could. And each one of these actually has a whole written up case study. So let me just do this.
Oh, wow.
Let me just touch on them. And those are so if you go down a little bit farther, you can get to our entire portfolio. But we can just talk about those. So the one to the far left, it's outside of Seattle, and he wanted to design a boutique practice. So he was leaving a large practice, sold it, and wanted to just be him. He wanted a different model. But he knew that it was all cash based, and he knew that he was going to be in an area with a C-suite type price range, right? But he knew he needed a space that would attract that. But yet at the same time, he doesn't just see the C-suite. He also sees the administrative staff in that area. So he's very close to office. It's fed by a lot of office building. So he sees people during the day and at lunchtime and breaks and things like that. So he needed to appeal to that entire realm. That is the smallest chiropractic office we've ever done. That's under 500 square feet.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I saw this. It's like size 530 net square feet. I was like, this is so tiny, but the way you designed it, it looks so
Yeah.
huge.
Oh, that's good. That's
That's very impressive.
part of the challenge.
And I really like the way you had this wall with this kind of pattern here. It really changes the way that, like draws the eye to it. And the space looks so clean. I like one of the things that I've run into when speaking of other colleagues I know. So a friend of mine has a clinic and he's a very busy neurologist and his clinic is just packed with trinkets and tchotchkes and all this stuff everywhere. There's not like a single place that's like empty, like where you could set something down. There's always something somewhere. And
Neurology.
yeah, and
We work a lot with functional neurologists, and minimalist is important because the mind and the brain start to get wacky. For example, that wall would be disturbing to someone who had a neurological problem you know what I'm saying? So that's the
yeah,
other thing, you have to design for what your patients are ailing. And neurological is probably the most extreme. There's one on our website that is neurological. But anyway, that's what happened with that one. This one that's in the middle, Chiropractic Lifestyle Studio, that one is a membership-based chiropractic and wholeness and wellness and functional neurology-based clinic. So what
wow,
they were creating is this, they don't have a front desk. You come in and you're part of a community. So their goal was to create this community. And so that's that whole lobby is created for that. Kids area back in the corner, et cetera. And they do, like I said, they do chiropractic, but they also do functional neurology in the back area. And they set their patients up on a wellness focus. All right. So they're coming often, but they're coming, like I said, creating community. So that's that one.
I really like that. And it does feel open. Like when you look at this space here, this looks almost like I've seen some shared offices where you can get office space and share it with other people. It's like that where
What their
you
goal
can.
was is every single one of those areas and with the chairs, they actually are outfitted with electrical outlets so people could come and actually work and hang out and etc. That area, this is
Oh,
also very close to some of the big hospitals. This is outside of the suburb of Detroit, Michigan. And so it's the nurses and the people coming and taking breaks. They can come over there and hang out, get adjusted. That's the exam room, et cetera.
that looks very beautiful.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it definitely looks extremely high end. And obviously, anybody who came here would feel great because even this, like, I guess these are the chairs you were mentioning before.
Those
Yeah.
chairs, if they do a brain, they call them brain tap. It's like I don't know. It's actually programmatic things that you can tap into, and it's calming or motivational and things of that sort. So they have a lot of different things that they offer, and that's why they've created the membership base. And
Wow.
it looks higher end because they're supporting this membership base. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
value, creating this value. And then that's the area where they do functional neurology, which is a whole nother people that go see a functional neurologist are people similar to you were talking about that have major injuries only in their brain and need healing or they can't function. It's not just not that people every day can't get quality from it. Now that one right there, this one, he does
The West University?
West Wellness, that's actually in Houston area.
Oh, nice.
And he is sees all the family, but she has a specialty in pediatric and pregnancy. And so she's created, an environment that's you can see it has a feminine touch to it, see the pink chairs and all that. She sees a lot
Yeah.
of women and a lot of women that want to get pregnant or that are pregnant and want to have healthy pregnancies and things that's pretty much her. And she also brings in oriental medicine. She has acupuncture also and a whole integrated approach to their wellness and individual offices. It's all closed adjusting room, very private because of the pregnancy and because of the patient that she's working with, as opposed to someone who's more in a sport or something, they may have more of an open for chiropractic, open adjusting semi-open adjusting or close adjusting have to do with who they're trying to see in the patient room.
Yeah, this is very beautiful. And like, especially if you look at the front, this obviously, like when you came in, if you come into a place like this, you're expecting to pay a good amount of money because it just looks so high end, you know?
Actually,
Yeah, I
she's
think
not that.
that's
She's pretty affordable, but she's not your Walmart chiropractor now.
exactly. Yeah. I'm just very impressed. This looks very nice. And I love the accents of the gold and the green. Did you do that? Is there a particular,
Very feminine, very has a little bit of glitz, a little bit of bling bling. Yeah, a little bit of
yeah,
that makes you want to. You have a lot of women, you want them to feel like princesses. That's just kind of
yeah,
what
absolutely.
happens.
That's exactly what we see at the med spas. You want to have high end marble and these kind of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much, very much. Now that brain, that is a neurologist that focuses on all kinds of brain, and it's connect. He bought a physical, which is a franchise PT area, and so we blended and got one space. So it's two doors, and one side you walk into the neurology side, and the other side you walk into the PT side. But the PT side is focused on brain stuff. So this is
Oh, that's what you mean by the physical, this thing over
yeah,
here.
that's a called franchise. That's a physical therapy franchise called
Oh, okay.
physical with a P with a which is
And
FY.
that's maybe. This looks very nice too. It looks very high end. But the colors are totally different. Can you explain how you decided to choose these
Not
colors?
all feminine, neutral, male and female would be there. They work with a lot of brain injuries also. So we didn't want it to be too busy. Once we were talking about that neurology, they're working with people that have had brain injuries or children that were born with brain challenges and injuries or things like that.
Man, that's beautiful. Very impressed with a lot of the work that you've
Thank
done here.
you.
Is there any other cases you want to
I want to
focus
show
on?
you this DFY real quick and just show you what I'm talking about.
Sure.
If you go up to the hamburger that's up on the left-hand side, I don't know how we're doing. You go hit the little carrot where it says design store.
Okay.
Okay, and then go to the second one down. It says designed for you. Okay, so this is our product that we put together that I said we put together during COVID when we didn't have enough work to do. But I'm going to have you scroll down, keep going a little bit. This shows you these 8 different styles, and that space architecturally is exactly the same space. But we
Wow.
finished it off. Now, this package is all finishes in furniture and lighting. It's no architecture. But we finished it off to have a totally different, we call it a style and design. And if you happen to open one of them, let's just open up contemporary real quick.
Okay.
If you go down a little bit, this is what contemporary says about your practice. You're progressive, you're unique, you're cutting edge, you're current, you're streamlined, you're ecocentric, and it appeals to, and that goes through the types of ideal patients it would
Oh,
appeal to. And if you look at another one like traditional, why don't you go scroll down a second for me and
oh, for this one? Okay.
yeah, scroll down, it'll take you back to all of them. Go to traditional. So traditional is established, conservative, tried and tested, time honored, sophisticated, dignified. So if you're breaking out into a new market and you're trying to go after an established and you want to show up that way, this brand would help you show up as this established, tried, tested, true. So that's what we're talking about branding. We're talking about
Yeah.
your image around you will help you show up for your patient a certain way.
I really like this because there's probably a lot of people that could use this. Maybe they don't have the money for a full consult or anything, but they could just basically buy one of these, pre-made designs. I think it's very genius of you to do this.
That was our goal was like, how can we believe that we do not believe in interior design, interior architecture is luxury. And I'm just going to go back a second. You mentioned earlier, we first focus on the function of the space because we are full architects. We're not just decorators. So the very first thing we have to do is make sure it functions well. So we do form follows function. We're talking the 3-dimensional attract patient, but we get it. You need to function well. You need the right amount of space. It needs to flow because that's going to go straight to your bottom line. That's going to reduce your overhead. That's going to create efficiency. I want to make sure everybody understands that we don't just do the decorating. But that package that I was showing you is just the decorating, just the finishes, and it's just focused on that brand and that image.
Man, that's really beautiful. And then with regards to those packages, like how would someone, for example, if they said, "Hey, I'm building a," so let me reshare the screen real quick here. I'm building a medical spa. How would which one we think would go for that one? Would that be the Serene, or could it be any of them?
The Serene actually was, I just shared this with you. The Serene actually was designed for a client that originally was going to do a med spa. So that one
Oh,
actually, that one's my design of a client that was going to do a med spa. In the middle of us designing it, some things shifted on him and he was going to be more integrated medicine instead of just med spa. So not as much for
mhm.
not, you understand the difference that I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we took it away from the med spa and it says serene. It's serene. It's supposed to make you feel comfortable and et cetera when you go into that space.
Yeah. And I like the colors are very calming, yeah, an ocean color, if you would.
Yes, 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 very much so. You're right. That's exactly the purpose. It's sand and water feel. Yes, very much so. Comforting,
Uh,
stress relieving, healing, nurturing, giving, steady. That, yes. Ocean theme would be very much applicable to that. So, yeah.
Very beautiful
So,
designs.
the goal of showing you this was how the same space, because that literally is architecturally the same space. Each one of them. It was designed on our 3D program called Revit. And it just was the application of finishes and lighting that was different to create those different spaces.
Man, that is such a, yeah, these are so different. Could you maybe talk about, I'm just curious about the industrial. Who would want to use an
Let's
industrial kind of
let's
look?
open it up and look.
Okay.
No nonsense,
the,
straightforward, sustainable, flexible, foundational, unique. You see this more in a downtown area or a vitalization area. So he's blending with that environment. But that's what he speaks for. Hey, I'm down to business. I'm down to business and for fun.
yeah, I love it. And it looks like that's exactly what I expect somewhere in a big city, a place that was being revitalized. And it looks high end. And I could see, like you put here, mid to high dollar services appeals to males. I could totally see this being even like a testosterone clinic or something like this.
Yes,
So,
it's very masculine as opposed to the serene is very feminine.
yeah,
Yes,
so true.
yes.
This is incredible. I really appreciate all this
Thanks
design.
for
I
letting
really
me talk
love the
about
fact you
this.
did that.
I'll have to make sure that we use that part of of this message somewhere.
Absolutely. And then I just had a few questions for you, if you don't mind. I was just wondering, some of these questions may be a little bit off the wall, but they're just questions that we always wanted to, since you have an amazing design brand, could you maybe talk about some of the people that we know, celebrities and these kind of things, who have used color to basically build their brands? And one of them, probably the most famous, is like Prince. Prince obviously has purple
Purple.
everywhere
Yeah.
and these things. Well, can you maybe just from your knowledge explain why someone might do that?
So I'm going to be real honest with you, and I don't follow a lot of celebrities, probably because of my age now at this point. I let my grandkids do that. But once again, they're creating a personal brand. Okay. So celebrities are wonderful to look at when you talk about branding. They're not talking about a logo that's attached to their wall. They're talking about how they show up and how they walk down the runway and how they one of the things like think about Prince dressed like Prince dresses and him being a country western singer. It doesn't connect, right?
Wouldn't make
Well, it doesn't
sense.
connect.
Yeah.
Think about a country western singer if it's trying to dress like Prince. It doesn't connect. It's that how you dress, how you show up, that is just becoming aware. My purpose is that people understand that their office is doing that. And
Yes.
once again, they need to be intentional. They need to be intentional about it. So, and why they pick it, I don't know. I'll just tell you this purple is one of those mysterious colors. It's actually, here, I have purple on right now. Don't I? But I don't know if you know the story behind the Red Hat Club. There's a Red Hat Club when people turn, it's probably not as popular as it used to be, but when people turn 50, they can join a Red Hat Club. And it was two women that just wanted to say, I'm tired of living in compliance to everyone around me. I've hit this age where I can just be whoever I want to be. So they started wearing red hats and purple scarves and things, and it became the Red Hat Society, called the Red Hat
Oh,
Society. So it's like sometimes people do that kind of thing just to break out, stand out, to do. That's just a wild statement. But purple is unique. Purple is not a common color. So purple showing up, it's more common than it used to be. You'll see it more in photos. I'll throw one thing out, and I have a free resource for your listeners that goes
okay.
through the five, we call it our 5 point checklist. But it's if you have an existing space, just doing an overview of what might need to be done to just make it spruced up without spending a lot of money. So it's things like, is it cluttered? Like you were saying, is it cluttered? Is it messy? And we talk about we start with saying, don't use your eyes. You're too close. You're too familiar. You can't see it. Bring in a respected third party to walk the space with you. And what is your first impression? What do they say your first impression is? How are you showing up? That's like number one. Then number two, is it cluttered and dirty and messy? You see it, just like you were talking about that gentleman. Now, if you have a whole lot of tchotchkes, this is the decorator mode, right? If you have a whole lot of tchotchkes, you make all of those tchotchkes work by getting them all organized in one, maybe display box or something, so they show up as one item instead of a whole bunch of little items. They have a coordinated effort. Just like you have a whole lot of pictures you want to put on the wall, you want to make them all, you've got one behind you. It's just you want to get all coordinated and laid out so that it appears as one thing initially. So that's how you can get away with the clutter. But you walk into offices and they have all those little plastic things with all the brochures, and there are hundreds of brochures. Nobody looks at anything. It's like, dude,
Exactly.
is that what you really want? Do one a week or whatever you need to. So cluttered, dirty, things of that sort. Is it dated? Is it worn out, which is different than cluttered? Things are just torn and ripped and they need to be replaced. The walls are, you said it, the walls are stuffed. It just doesn't appear that you're care for it very well. So are you going to care for your patient if you're not caring for your space? And then we look at, I think I said dated, and then we look at, are you using lighting? Because lighting can just, you have beautiful spaces and you have brass, hard lighting that can just change everything. So that's for your listener. So those are some things we would talk through. I don't know if that's the question you asked me. I got off on.
Yeah. But one of the subjects I wanted to ask you about was sacred geometry. It's become somewhat of a buzzword. Like a lot of people have studied sacred geometry. We know, for example, in medicine, there is sacred geometry in the body. Like, for example, the distance between tip of your finger and your first proximal digit. If you take that ratio versus the tip of your finger to your arm and your elbow, it basically goes into this ratio known as the golden ratio, which is the same ratio like a nautilus shell, the same ratio in the Milky Way spiral. These golden ratios are everywhere. They're in the face. Even when we do aesthetics, we do the golden ratio for lips and eye and et cetera. How might one use the powers of sacred geometry? Or what's your feeling about sacred geometry and how might you use it?
So when a designer goes through design school, architecture and interior design, and I'm not sure about graphic and design of that sort, but I know you spend a lot of time studying sacred geometry, sacred geometry. I can't say it very well because, and you spend time drawing, you spend time doing things because it's the theory, or I don't know if it's theory, I don't know, but that is very holistic to a paid person. Okay. It's very
Yes.
it's a very positive thing, very good energy. And if you notice anything that you would consider really good quality design, it follows the rules and things around this sacred geometry. And it becomes like in some of the things you're talking about, it's actually measured and scientific. But for a designer starts with a gift, but they go to school to learn how to take that gift and make it go farther. There's a natural inherent view of things, and more than likely we'll go back to that sacred geometry. So we would do different kinds of art projects and study projects, and then we would go back and see where the sacred geometry was in that and match stuff where this was a high quality design and this wasn't. So it's very interesting. And proportion, scale, it's using the principles of design, balance. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah.
but a good quality designer, it's inherent to what they design.
And how do you feel about the use of like natural textures? Like, I've seen some in some designs where people have what appears to be almost like stones put on the wall to kind of give a feeling of stone. And then maybe another wall might have like more wood, like going back to natural like feels. Do you feel that using elements of nature within your design is something that's useful? And what's your position on that?
So once again, it depends on your patients and what you're trying to do. I think overall, we already talked about bringing nature into the space can create a real healing environment. But you can take stone and you can take a rough stone, implies maybe some struggle and it's a psychology, right? There's a psychology of what that texture implies. You can take a really smooth stone and go, hey, that came off the bottom of water. And I can have that sense of it came off the bottom of a river because it's been washed over with the smoothness and stuff. And one of the things I love to do is look at brick. Okay. Now, brick is not necessarily natural, but if anyone's ever designed a house and they're looking for the brick, there's hundreds of brick. Every brick has a different emotion attached to it. The really tight, crisp brick feels very back to that traditional, very expected. They follow the rules. Everything's precise, etc. Whereas crumbled brick looks like, man, they've been around for a long time. Yeah. So those are so textures all have memory to them. Okay. They have memory that's associated with them, or things that people have related to and how that. So yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. So you want to bring in nature. You talk about wood. Same thing with wood. You can go from barn wood to a very slick, like you were looking in that one office, that was a rosewood veneer, as opposed to you put it next to the barn wood. You're going to have a whole different impression. They're both bringing in nature, but the barn wood is going to be very comfortable, very kick off your shoes, wear your Bluetooth. It's just the barn, right? As opposed to that really high end, you're in a fine residence or you're in a fine hotel or something of that.
Absolutely. And then I was wondering if you could maybe talk about if you're somebody who's maybe they're starting out your practice, you don't have a lot of resources initially. Is there maybe one area or a few areas that you would recommend someone focus on to make a big intention or impression?
So we tell this to our students is lighting and color. Those are the two biggies because could be in paint. Paint's the most inexpensive decorating material that you have. So use it to your advantage. And if you go into a lease, let me give you some rules of thumb. You go into a lease situation and the landlord is going to pay for everything. They're more than likely going to give you one color of paint. And if they want to paint an accent on a wall or anything like that, they're going to charge you extra for it. So I don't know why, but I do know why. It's not as fast. They can't finish the job as fast. It takes more effort. It's more fine tuning, et cetera. But it's still the least expensive finish that you can put on to create different impact. So what we love is like just in paint, like overall, you might have a lighter paint as you enter the space, but once you go into the rooms, they go a little bit darker in color, creates a little bit more coziness, et cetera. Then you might have an accent wall that creates, you like that texture on the wall. But you can't afford the texture if we could have just painted the wall. And that would have helped create a lot of drama because you can use color to draw your eye to something. And we call that the principle of emphasis. Your eye is always going to walk in and see one thing first. And if it sees too many things that are conflicting, it's not as appealing. It's going back to that cohesiveness of the geometry. I'm sorry, I'm getting lofty in what I'm trying to say, but as you go into a space, what do you want people to see first? And that's where you want to put your energy. Some people call it the wow factor. It doesn't have to be fancy textures on the wall. It could just be paint, okay? Or it could be a wonderful piece of art. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be wrapped canvas. It could be photography that you have blown up. It could be things of that sort. So put some emphasis in that. And then lighting, I mentioned lighting earlier. Usually your typical office space is going to have 2x4 lights just awash over the whole space. If you can spend a little bit of money and just vary that up, get some recessed cans in part of it and get the washed light in some other parts of it, because I know you're having to be economical in how you use it. But just that you change the environment dramatically by changing the light. The
Absolutely.
brighter the light, the more energy. The lower the light, the lower the energy. It's natural. Your circadian rhythm, melatonin working for you, not against you. So
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such an honor and pleasure, and I've learned so much. And so if anybody wants to reach out to you, needs your help on design or figuring out how to, maximize their space, how might they go about following you, reaching out to you?
So our website is crossfielddesign.com, and it is so full of so many resources. We have lots and lots of free resources. And I may or may not have said this, but when we started out teaching, our website started out as a blog. And so we started writing material on things. So there's so many free blogs, free resources. We've got free handouts like that one I was talking to you for your listeners. Go crossfieldsdesign.com/listeners. It'll take you straight to that 5 free designer checklist. And then we have a monthly newsletter we send out with new things and what's fresh on Pinterest or more floor plans. We offer floor plans free. So we have a lot of free stuff. And then I already mentioned to you the Design For You is an online product. I also have a course. Now the course was created recently and it's really focused on chiropractors, but it's all about opening your office. And I'm eventually going to add modules for other disciplines. But they can check that out. And then we have floor plans you can purchase. We have some free kind of in between stuff. But if you're interested in working with us, or us working for you, let me say that. We have a complimentary consultation. It's about an hour, and you would give us some information on your project, set up a scheduled appointment, send us anything you want to look at. And our sales person, Allison, is a designer. She would call herself an ex-designer, but once a designer, always a designer. But she would actually process through your project and help determine which path you could go down with us and how much it would cost and where we go from there. And we do ground ups. We do full architecture and interior for new builds, interior new build. And we do what we call facelift for projects that need faces that need a new look, a new image, a new freshening, whatever.
I think there's probably a lot of those. I could definitely see that. So basically, if someone wanted to reach out to you in employer services, they just go to the website and go to contact us, or what's the best way for them to?
You shouldn't be able to miss it, but it's called complimentary consultation. And it's up in the top right corner. Just click on that, and there's a form to fill out to give us information on your project so that Allison's prepared. And then you can actually upload things on that also. And then that'll take you to a Calendly link to schedule an appointment.
Absolutely. And the website again is Crossfield Design, and you have a lot of resources here, including the top 15 floor plans, 5-phase timeline checklist, 5 biggest mistakes practitioners make and how to avoid them. Sounds pretty useful. And the 5-point designer checklist.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure and honor having you.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.